I'm not one to give relationship advice, but I am about to tell you a story about why you shouldn't ghost girls. My story is a little strange, starting with a mansion and ending in an experimental hospital in the middle of the ocean. I'm about to share the biggest story ever. This is about the wild ride of how my dead boyfriend mysteriously rose from the dead with an entirely different face. Sounds crazy, right? But it's 100% true, and I promise it is worth it to reach the end. First though, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you do, you'll meet the love of your life in 7 days. I knew the moment I met Heath, he was going to be the love of my life. We were nothing short of a power couple. We were both incredibly attractive and very rich. Our connection was deeper than looks and money though. We loved each other. There was nothing that could separate us, or so I thought. One day, Heath and his family planned a big outing to the countryside in their private jet. I sadly couldn't go because I had school, but I did show up at the airport to wave goodbye. I didn't cry hysterically or anything embarrassing like that. As far as I knew, I would see him again in a couple of days. Little did I know, watching him board the jet would be the last time I would ever see him again. When he didn't return calls or texts, I just figured he had no service. When he didn't come back from his trip after a week or two, well, I called the police and filed a missing person report for his whole family. No one had heard anything from any of them this whole time. It was strange, so they sent out a search party. But I was not prepared for what the investigations found, or I guess, more correctly, what they didn't find. I'll never forget the night the police came to me. It was about 3 a.m. and I was up all night unable to sleep. When I heard the knock on the door, I immediately ran over thinking that this was going to be good news. Oh, I could not have been more wrong. "Are you Edna?" the officer asked. I nodded and asked them what they found. "You may want to sit down for this, ma'am," the other officer responded with a sad look on his face. They explained that they found the wreckage of the private jet. Apparently, it had crashed into the middle of the woods and exploded, far away from any civilization. I don't remember so much after that because I spent the next few weeks crying pretty much 24/7. I neglected school and didn't show up to work. I was incredibly depressed for a long time. There was a part of me that felt like my life's purpose had ended. There was another part of me that refused to accept that Heath died. I spent so much time researching the accident and trying to find any trace of him. At first, my parents and friends were incredibly understanding. Everyone grieves differently, and this was my way. They thought I would grow out of it. Here's a fun fact for you. Have you ever heard about Hachiko? Hachiko was a dog that used to meet his owner at a train station every day after work to pick him up. When his owner died one day, Hachiko continued to try to meet his owner every day for years after his death. Okay, so that wasn't really a fun fact, but it's that kind of loyalty I had for Heath. It's not like I could just forget about him, right? Well, my morning grew obsessed, and my friends and family went from being sympathetic to concerned. I became that sad, crazy woman stuck crying over some dead high school sweetheart. Before I knew it, I lost 10 years of my life waiting for some miracle to happen. My parents told me that I was still in my prime and I should really work on getting past this. I was a young, pretty, kind woman who deserved happiness. You know, they were right. I decided I would make the first step in the new direction. In order to let the new Edna grow, I decided to give myself a fresh start. I moved far away in the country, a place where no one would know me and I could really make a new life there. I guess I just wasn't ready to get rid of the past just yet. My first few days in my new town were so freeing. No one stared at me with sad eyes or anything. I decided to go to the local diner to get myself a well-deserved snack. I was about to get a lot more than a milkshake though. When I sat down at the table, a super attractive guy about my age waited on me. I was a little tongue-twisted for a moment. I couldn't stop staring into his eyes. They were the same color blue as Heath's. I was frozen. That is until he handed me my drink. I saw something I didn't think I'd ever see again. Something that I thought went up in flames during a jet explosion. The waiter was wearing the watch his grandfather had given him. There was no way I could have mistaken it for anything else. "Heath?" I whispered before jumping into his arms, spilling the milkshake all over the both of us. "Heath, where have you been?" Now, you're probably expecting this reunion to be magical. It's been 10 years. I bet there'd be lots of fireworks and stuff, right? Nope. The waiter just said he'd get something to clean the mess. I could hear he was on the phone with someone, but I couldn't make out who. I started having all these scenarios in my head. What if this wasn't Heath? They might have had the same eyes and watch, but the face was all different. Had I just thrown myself at a stranger? Was he in there calling the cops? After 20 minutes or so, the boy came back calmer. I was getting ready to apologize before the unthinkable happened. He asked for my number. He explained that the jet accident had really messed him up a bit. He had to get a bunch of plastic surgeries and he had lost most of his memory. He is still a little confused and flustered over the whole thing, but he wanted to text me. He also asked that we keep our little romance a secret until he can work some stuff out. I took that as a complete win and immediately gave him my number. Considering how awkward and shy he was, I wondered how our texting conversations would be. I hadn't even left the store for 10 minutes when I was already confronted by angry stares and unfriendly faces. I thought it was weird and tried to smile, and they didn't smile back. Eventually, the older lady turned to me and told me to stop being a homewrecker. Me, a homewrecker? She told me that she saw me hug the waiter inside and I'd better back off and stop acting desperate because I stood no chance. I thought it was so weird and immediately had questions about what was going on. I immediately texted Heath back and questioned why people were being mean to me on the streets. He explained that this was country life. Everyone gets involved with everyone's business. To them, I was just an outsider. He had been there long enough that they accepted him and expected him to fit a role. They wanted him to get married to this one girl. According to him, it was like a one-sided arranged marriage. He insisted that I just stay clear of him in the restaurant until the locals got a chance to warm up to me a bit. I thought it was so weird, but we weren't from the country, so who were we to judge? I was worried how it would turn out, being this was the start of our relationship, but that was actually the only rocky road. To my surprise, they were amazing. He seemed to remember much more than he let on. I was pretty much glued to my phone. I caught him up to everything in my life and we went right back to our romantic ways. Just because we were romantic doesn't mean everything was great though. This one girl constantly seemed to watch me no matter where I was. I had no idea who she was, but I could tell she hated me. I started to have issues with my plants being ripped up and rotten eggs thrown at my window, and I think it was all her. It kind of freaked me out and I just wanted Heath and I to get past this. I begged him to let us be together, but he kept insisting it was better over the phone for now. He was shy and wanted to work on himself. Might I say, shy was an understatement. Over the phone, he would profess his love and write me poems and even sing to me. Every time I saw him in person, he was awkward and barely said a thing. I waved at him when he was buying groceries and he turned bright red and ran the other way. After months of keeping this up, I became a little impatient that we had not even gone on a single date. As a helpless romantic, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I don't want to sound like too much of a stalker, but I might have memorized Heath's shifts. I decided that what we needed to push our relationship to the next level was to have a grand declaration of love. Well, I played it all out perfectly in my head. Try not to judge me for being too cheesy here. I was gonna wait until Friday, the busiest night of the week. I printed out a Team Heath shirt with a bunch of hearts, and I did my hair and makeup super nicely. I was just gonna run in there in front of everyone and get that kiss I had been searching for. I'm pretty attractive, too. What guy wouldn't be excited about something like this? Well, let's just say I was about to find out. The second I walked in, people started staring at me. It wasn't unusual as I really stuck out in this small town where everyone knew everybody. I walked over to the jukebox and turned on one of our favorite romantic songs and then waved at him. In my mind, I looked like a knight in shining armor. I romantically ran up to him, told him I loved him and kissed him. I thought I nailed it. It was just like Heath had done for me before. When I looked around, though, no one was clapping. In fact, most people looked horrified and some had whipped out their phones to take mocking pictures. I must have looked like a freak. I turned to Heath, who was in shock. He turned and ran the other way as fast as he could. I felt all eyes on me, angry, judging eyes. When I thought it couldn't possibly get any worse, a little girl ran up to me. "I don't know who you are, but you better leave my brother Manny alone. Don't think we all have noticed you stalking him at work. He has a girlfriend, and she's not a freak like you." I didn't know where to begin my explanation, and the girl walked away before I could even try. It's not what it seems like. I was super embarrassed. The more I thought about what I did, the more my face turned red. I had shown up unannounced to a boy's place of work with a picture of him on my shirt based on his shift times I memorized. It was official. I guess I was a stalker. But what I still didn't know was who this guy was. Heath never had a sister. And what was this about a girlfriend? I called Heath 100 times. Literally, it always went straight to voicemail. This guy seriously ghosted me? Again? I decided to be sneaky one last time. After all, I am just a stalker freak. So I decided to look up this Manny guy. It was a small town with one diner, so it didn't take long to get a result. I looked up his photo and it was him all right. Not only that, but his pictures were all with some other girl. He did have a girlfriend. What he also had was this address publicly available. So I hopped in my car and decided to pay him a visit. He lived only about 5 minutes away from my house. I went right up to the door. I could hear someone arguing in the house. It was Heath, or Manny I should say, and a girl. It seemed like they were arguing about him cheating. He kept insisting it was all a misunderstanding and how he didn't kiss any girls. She replied by saying, "Oh yeah? Well, look at these photos from last night. How do you explain that?" I took that moment to ring the bell, and sure enough, this Manny guy was fighting with his girlfriend. His girlfriend? It was the one that had been bothering me this whole time. "You have a lot of explaining to do," I shouted at him. "He certainly does," the girl said before storming out of the door. He completely ran by me and was chasing the girl down, crying for her to listen. It was like I wasn't even there. I yelled at him that he couldn't just ghost me again after 10 years, and he just looked even more confused. "You know what? Fine. You aren't going to listen to me. I'm just gonna go. It was a mistake coming here and a mistake wasting all my life waiting on you. I can't tell if you're a liar or an imposter, but what I do know is that you're a jerk." I didn't bother to listen to anything else and ran to my house and started packing immediately. I wanted to be on the road tonight and put my whole past behind me once and for all. I was done being that dog that waited every day for her owner. I was my own person, and I was not going to be waiting on him anymore. I got back to my house and it was covered with graffiti and garbage. As I walked up to unlock my door, this old woman shouted "shame" at me from her porch. Leaving tonight was probably the safest option. As I was on the road, I got bombarded with calls, all from Heath. I pulled over to the side of the road and saw I had about 30 voicemails and 50 texts. I answered the next call rather meanly. "You shouldn't keep messaging someone if you know they're on the road," I snapped at him. "Look, we need to talk about everything," he pleaded. "Talk about what? How you're a liar?" "Please, Edna. I haven't been honest, but I promise it's not in the way that you think." He gave me an address and asked me to meet him there. I figured at this point, what did I have to lose? The address was pretty far away. It took about 30 minutes to get there. It was a small little cabin in the woods. Nothing too fancy or bad. I took a deep breath and went right up to the front door. I didn't even have to knock as the door opened as though I was being expected. I was greeted by a blue-eyed boy about my age in a wheelchair. He had aged a bit and there were some burn scars on his arms, but there was no doubt that this was Heath. "I never wanted you to have to see me like this," he said, rather embarrassed. I broke down in tears and hugged him. As it turns out, the story Manny told me wasn't so far off. Heath was thrown from the plane before it crashed and burned. He immediately dragged himself over to the wreckage to try to pull his parents out. Unfortunately, before he could get there, it exploded, burning his arms and flying him into a tree, paralyzing him. A family found him and brought him to a hospital, but he had lost some of his memory. He had been living with his friend Manny this whole time. He traded him the very expensive watch for this cabin in the middle of the woods. "Why didn't you call?" I pleaded. "I would have accepted you. I didn't get my memory for anything back for a while, and then when I did, it didn't seem fair to pull you into this life. I assumed you moved on. You are quite a catch." He explained that Manny had called him after I spilled the milkshake on him and asked him what he should do. He instructed Manny to give me Heath's number and just let him see where it goes. I couldn't resist talking to you, even if it was selfish on my part to drag you into this mess. He might have been in a wheelchair and a little worse for wear, but he was the man I fell in love with over a decade ago. We kissed, and that was that. Heath and I ended up moving back to my home city, and he's been seeing some top doctors. They think he might even walk again. True love was worth the wait in the end. Worth the wait in the end. Worth the wait.